All right, well, let's see. Yes, it is 5:30. We have reached the appointed hour. We have a quorum, so I'll call the meeting to order. First, a notice it's being recorded, which Sarah has just clicked. Um, I'll read the standard opening statement. This is Northampton Conservation Commission meeting for the 26th of June, 2025. The commission is a group of unpaid volunteers who work to protect the natural environment of Northampton. We are concerned with the 8 interests defined in the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act. Our duties also include open space acquisition and management. We operate in a way that's consistent with open meeting law requirements. All meeting dates, times, and agendas are posted in advance, and we invite public comment during our meetings. However, we ask the public to limit their comments to issues that are within our purview. Today's agenda includes a continuation of a notice of intent for construction of 9 solar panels in a canopy over the riverfront area on Mount Tom Road. Then a request for determination of applicability to determine if installation of septic infrastructure within the riverfront area and buffer zone is subject to the Wetlands Act or the City Wetlands Ordinance. And then a notice of intent for grading and landscaping work within the buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetlands on Stonewall Drive. We also have an land acquisition to consider. And to talk about the meeting schedule in the summer, where we usually pick one month where we only meet once. So first item would be, are there any general public comments not having to do with the case before us this evening? If not, there were no minutes for this week's meeting. So we'll proceed with the.
Kevin, there should have been one set from April.
It's one set.
Oh, was there?
Yep.
Oh, okay, well, forgive me. What was the date on that?
April 24th.
Ah. Well, let me see here. All right, well, while I look at that, is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
I'll second it.
And a second. Any amendments or modifications while I'm just quickly scanning it here? If not, all in favor?
Roll call for the minutes. Paul?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Mason?
Yes.
Downey?
Yes.
And Kevin?
Yes, belatedly reading it, yes.
Unanimous. Thank you.
So we'll move on to the first case, a notice of intent for construction of solar panel canopies on Mount Tom Road. We've received some supplemental information since last time. And who wants to speak to that from the applicant?
Good evening, Michael Minot on behalf of the applicant. So we submitted a letter on June 16th and some revised plans. As indicated in the letter, the owner's committed to removal of 6 storage trailers, and there are some revised compensatory storage calculations contained in those plans. Based on that and the fact that we believe that the applicant submitted everything to satisfy the requirements under local and state law, we're asking that the commission proceed with rendering a decision, hopefully granting the notice of intent. If there are additional questions, though, we're prepared to address those. And the owner is also willing to consider potentially if this would be a condition amenable to granting approval, potentially limiting the number of vehicles on the site, if that's something that would be a deciding factor for the commission. So, with what we've submitted, it's a bit unclear after the last meeting if there's anything specifically other than what has been submitted that the commission would be looking for from the applicant in order to approve. But we believe that the removal of those 6 storage trailers and the revised compensatory storage calculations should satisfy the applicable requirements there.
I will want to just correct the cover letter on your most recent submission that said that the commission has um, not rendered a decision. Every time there's been a continuation, it's been at the request of the applicant. This last time, we were about to close the hearing and render a negative decision. And the applicant said, no, please continue. Understanding, as we have tried to reinforce at each hearing, that we cannot consider this site without requiring the entire site to now meet requirements, the regulatory requirements that are in place today. And that would require much more comprehensive addressing of the surface area, the management ongoing of drainage, catchment basements, filtering and separation of petroleum products, et cetera, et cetera. It would just be a much more extensive application for us to even be able to consider it as being in compliance with the current requirements. So, and we've tried to make that clear at each of the hearings up until now. I have not discussed this more than we have in our last hearing because we cannot have deliberations outside of public hearings. So I don't know that any of my colleagues on the commission might disagree with me, but from my perspective, nothing substantive has been changed since our last meeting at which we were about to render a negative decision. I'll open the questions to my colleagues and say if anybody has additional information that they want or questions or comments they want to make, please do. But that's how it looks to me at this point.
It seems that one important thing to share is that the DEP noted that apparently that the removal of the 6 trailers was a partial correction of violations that had been committed, but that does not render it as improving performance standards for stormwater storage. So that's not a negative thing. That's a good thing, but it's not sufficient.
Indeed. Other comments from commissioners?
Have we actually seen flagging for the wetlands to delineate them? I think the answer is no.
Scott, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I can't speak for the wetland scientist himself, but as he previously stated in prior meetings, that the wetland flags are downslope from where the edge of the, if you want to call it, the activity zone where all of the work is being performed. It's my understanding he has flagged those. And there are physical flags out there. I mean, if anybody feels adventurous and wants to go down that steep slope to look at those flags, have at it. I am only going by what the wetland scientist has told us and what he has said in prior meetings with the commission.
I mean, the thing that I just still am struggling with is the riverfront redevelopment standards and seeing the improvement over existing conditions. Because I think that I was really hoping that this, revised plan would have more restoration or native planting or pulling back of like some of the activities from the resource area. And I think the trailer removal, is clearly a good thing, but I don't really think it helps with me in terms of seeing this as an improvement of existing conditions.
I think we
Well,
have,
there is.
I think we
there-
have 163 plants that we're putting in there.
Yeah, there's a whole mitigation plan that the wetland scientist has put together that's
Okay.
gonna greatly improve that downslope site or that downslope area, prior to or up against, the limit of wetlands. So to say that there's no improvement, I think that would be, grossly understated. Any of the, tires or automobile refuse that may be downslope of that will be removed at the time of replication. And it's also my understanding that a lot of the invasive species or invasive plants that are there are to be removed and replaced with native vegetation. So it's going to be a marked improvement compared to what it is now. And on top of that, with these particular sites, with auto salvage yards, the majority of the vehicles tend to get moved around during construction so that the company can go in there, construct these solar canopies, and then the property owner can go back and neatly arrange these vehicles in a more manageable method, thereby improving the condition of the site overall.
And we have communicated to you in the past that a detailed explanation of how that will be handled on an ongoing basis. What are they going to do? Because, they're going to bring in gravel and there's fill, there's got to be drainage considerations, there's got to be burns and filtering to protect the wetlands. Yes, it's possible that there would be substantial improvement, but that has to do with the operation of the salvage yard on an ongoing basis, not just with a temporary reconfiguring of the salvage yard during construction.
Well,
I don't think it's temporary at all.
Pardon me?
I'm
I
sorry.
don't think it's temporary at all. Why do you say it's temporary?
Activities during construction as opposed to how the salvage yard operates 5 years from now?
Have you been to the salvage yard recently?
Not for a couple of months.
I mean, so my name is Roxanne Ackerson.
Yep.
And my dad bought the site 6 years ago. And when we bought the site, we did our due diligence and there was no consent orders. It was a clean operated yard. There was, we hired someone to look at all that. So he passed away a few years ago, and I'm just surprised. I mean, I own 5 yards in Connecticut. We own gold standard yards in Connecticut. I would love to meet you out there and we could do a walkthrough. So we could be on the same page of how you're interpreting the way things look. I would be very happy, to take you through there. And I just don't understand how this isn't perceived as an improvement. I'm even willing to, reduce the amount of cars that, we keep in the yard, because I think this is a win-win for everyone. The community of Northampton, for the environment, for our company. It's just a win-win all around. I don't understand all the negatives. So, I mean, maybe if it's an operation problem, I mean, I was at 3 different yards in your state this week, and I will tell you, they didn't compare. On organization, cleanliness, they did not compare. I also visited a site that has these panels, a very different site than ours. But I would be extremely happy to meet you guys out there and, walk through together, and you guys could, like we could talk about operations. We don't crush cars on site. I mean, this will only make things even better from an environmental standpoint.
We've been giving the same feedback ever since the application first came to us. That in fact, that kind of application would be something that we'd be happy to review, that we were hoping this would turn into. We just haven't received that application.
What application?
Application that would address the future operation of the salvage yard as well as the current cleanup. To enable us to say, oh yes, if this all goes forward as planned, this will bring it into compliance with requirements. Downey, you were about to say something?
Yeah, I just had a question as to whether, I mean, I just to note that the wetlands ordinance says at a minimum, proposed work shall result in an improvement. So that's not a ceiling, that's a floor. But I just wanted to ask whether any consideration was given to pulling structures and the bioretention area back outside of the 50-foot protected zone. Just because in my mind, this is building structures is defined as part of alteration. It's going to be permanent. It would never change, or it wouldn't change in the near term or even medium term. I noted at the last meeting that there was, I'm counting on the current plans, 5 different piers. So this is not even counting the overhang of the panels themselves over the protected zone. But then as well, the bioretention zone is shown well inside the 50-foot protected zone. And I'm just wondering, is that operationally necessary? And in terms of my judgment of this project, I think that the solar panels, that would obviously be great to have. Any improvements to operations would be great. The restoration or partial restoration, removal of invasive species, that's also a positive. But I'm just wondering why go into that 50-foot protected zone? Again, it may have happened in the past, even prior to the current version of the ordinance. But certainly when you're proposing new activity, a modification to activity on site, pulling things back to what's now recognized as an absolute minimum, I'm just wondering whether that was considered.
Well, I think initially what we had done, we had proposed all of those particular items that you mentioned right up to the limit of the existing activity zone, if you will. So on the existing conditions plan, there's a compacted gravel travel aisle. So obviously it's been used. It's been used probably for, that particular area has probably been in operation for a number of decades. And we only went up to the limit of the tree line because that is where the limit of current activity is. So we tend not to try to go any further than what is continually being active on the site. So we're trying not to violate anything other than what is currently being used on the site.
Well, I understand that consideration, but I'm just asking that's saying we're not going to push farther into the protected zone. But since this is at a minimum improvement, I'm wondering whether any consideration was given to pulling back, especially if that travel aisle was no longer necessary given the reconfiguration of the vehicles underneath the panels. I mean, again, this gets into the bifurcation of, initially this was presented as just a solar panel and the operations was in a separate box that could not necessarily be addressed. We have, now the operator seems to be much more interested and much more willing to discuss modifications of operations. So again, pulling that back to me would seem, putting it on par with a lot of.
All right, so if we do that, does that get us a permit?
It would get my vote, but I don't decide. I mean, I think.
How about the other members?
I would like to see it pulled back also. That would be helpful.
Does it get your vote?
I think we have more to discuss.
Anyone else?
I'm not comfortable voting on anything I don't see. So I'd have to see what the proposal was.
That's understandable.
So
These structures themselves are somewhat arbitrary. I don't want to say that they're totally arbitrary because they have to face south. or nearly south, and this is a nice north-south orientation. The configuration of the arrays themselves can be skinnier or fatter or longer. You know, we've designed a lot of different types of arrays over salvage yards. And so that's something that we can consider. We just don't want to spin and have arguments with phantom objections. And I don't mean to belittle the objections, but we just need to know what they are, and we can solve the problem. You know, at the beginning, at the top of the meeting, Mr. Lake outlined a series of things which I've never seen in writing. You know,
I have
total
expressed those same
communication.
things verbally in prior commission meetings. And I
Never
believe
seen them.
Sarah
I've never
has
seen them in
expressed.
writing. Part of the problem is that we're trying to hit a target that we can't see. We've got blindfolds on.
Mm.
And, you know, just this recent comment from Mr. Meyer is encouraging. You know, and I asked the question in a prep meeting recently about the 50-foot setback and whether that was an issue or not. You know, it comes up tonight, and that's good. You know, I'm happy to hear it, and we'd like to address it, but I need to know what else is there.
Well, I have to point out that the commission's concerns about this have remained constant from the beginning, and this has been in writing in staff reports, which have been provided to the applicant. Perhaps they haven't been shared with you, but everybody's working under the same Wetlands Ordinance, Wetlands Protection Act, and the same 310 CMR with performance standards that are applicable to everyone. So there's no surprises here.
But those points had all been responded to months ago. So I guess what we're trying to understand is when you say bring the property into compliance, you know, understanding what you mean by that, what the commission would be looking for to approve this specifically.
In the first public hearing, and probably in the second public hearing, we stressed that no, it has to be the whole site. It can't just be what disturbances are for the installation of the solar panels. We started being very enthusiastic, looking forward to this being completed. This would be a wonderful thing if done properly. The feedback we got from the applicant was that, well, we can't tell the operator what to do. That's a separate thing. And we tried to be clear that it cannot be, from our perspective, a separate thing.
We have the
So-
operator on the call, and she has spoken.
I
And
understand, but this is, you're now asserting that we've been, and the letter from the attorney asserted that we've been failing to render a decision. And in fact, no, we were ready to render a negative decision. And in each time, the applicant has asked us for a continuation. And each time we've said we have to have a proposal before us, an application before us that addresses the entire site and all of the requirements. So there is no, as Sarah said, there's no mystery here. This is not no blindfolds. This has been out front the entire time. We'd love to see it happen, but we have to see it, as Melissa just said.
you
we have to
understand
see an
how vague that
application.
is? Do you understand how vague that is, that we have to have an application that addresses the entire site? What does that mean?
Right. Can you be specific so we know what we have to
Yes.
do?
Okay,
I can read.
I have one. I have one if I may interject.
Sure,
Sure.
Paul, go ahead.
How are you going to prevent untreated stormwater from flowing directly into the wetlands? We have visited the site, and maybe we need to go again, but we've seen incredible amounts of mud and sheens of petrochemicals in the mud, and not a very sufficient berm to protect the river.
Well, hasn't that
On the
already
berm.
been, hasn't that already been covered by your stormwater manager? He's already approved the stormwater aspects of the project.
No, that's not what stormwater covers. Stormwater primarily covers damage done by water flowing off the site at a higher rate, right? It secondarily also may cover treatment, but from our perspective, even if water flows off at the same rate, which would get you approval from, Doug McDonald on your stormwater, if that water is carrying pollutants, then it impairs the interests that are protected by the Wetlands Protection Act and the ordinance. So the two approval of the stormwater plan doesn't necessarily qualify as preventing pollution from entering the wetlands, which is, I think, what Mr. Foster Moore just spoke to.
Yes.
And what's the requirement there?
I think in a lot of instances, it's deep sump catch basins to catch the first flush of water off of surfaces that usually contains the highest amounts of pollutants. In this case, it would have to be, the sizing of the bioswale would have to be sufficient to, again, hold that water and allow it to infiltrate. And then again, you would have basically biotreatment of that pollution. I think that, just speaking for myself, and again, you're dealing with a commission with different commissioners that have different opinions, but for me, the biggest thing would be to pull back. The distance in itself is a protection. So pulling it back to the 50 feet, pulling operations back to 50 feet, putting something permanent like a large bioswale, a large berm to prevent stormwater from traveling, off-site immediately during a rain event, that also constrains operations in a permanent way, which I, as a commissioner, best of intentions don't hang around for 10 years or for the next operator. So, a permanent structure, a significant structure, is something that gives me assurance that the interests of the act will be protected.
And from your perspective, a large berm would be how high? What are we talking about? 3 feet high?
I want to assert here that we don't get into the business of designing projects for applicants. That if you want to hire a consultant to provide that kind of technical expertise, that is part of the application
I'm not getting
process.
technical. Is it 10 feet high? Is it 3 feet high?
That, given the circumstances, that would require a technical analysis and an answer in order to answer.
And then when the addition of those berms alter your compensatory storage? So if we're bringing in fill to create these berms, now we have to reevaluate the compensatory storage, which is back to square one. It seems like this is like a never-ending circle, a vicious circle that we just can't solve.
We can redesign. We can get outside of the 50-foot protected area. We can create a berm, mitigation planting, remove invasive species, change the operations, crush cars indoors, actually no crushing at all. But dismantle cars indoors, limit the amount of vehicles that are on the site. Those things are in our control, we can do. And we've talked to the operator, Roxanne, who's on the call, and she's supportive of this and wants to work with you to create a win-win for the environment, for the community, and for their operations. So let's work together. Let's not fight each other.
We have not been fighting. We've been merely trying to tell you what we need to receive in
I
order
beg
to
to differ,
approve it.
Mr. Lake, I beg to differ. It's been contentious. Let's just call it what it is.
I'm sorry, it has not been contentious. We have not been contentious. We've been very respectful.
Well,
We like to see project success.
you call rejection contention?
If we don't
It's not
agree,
contentious to reject
it's not
something
being
that doesn't meet the standards.
contentious.
That's our job.
I would prefer to call it discernment.
Well,
Pardon me, Paul?
if we could just get some kind of a solid blueprint that we could on our end work toward to satisfy the committee, we're willing to do that. We're here to try and make it work. We think that there's benefits, for obviously, for us and for the community. I mean, these kind of projects are really great things to have, and it will improve a site. Listen, we know that salvage yards not everyone's favorite, thing to have in town. We understand that. And this will, will improve that. And if we could just get some kind of clarity on, like really what you want to see, what you want to see us do, we could get it together on our end and see if we can make that happen for you. We want everyone, I don't want, I'd like for everyone to feel comfortable with this, not just the majority, but I'd like every one of you to feel comfortable with it. So if we can just get some kind of target, a punch list. And so we could work together on our end to see, okay, is it realistic? Can we make this happen? And if it isn't, then we can come back and say, all right, we can't make it happen. And if it is, then we like to lay it out to you. We're trying to get a positive vote. And, I'm willing to work, really hard on my side to make this happen. But we just need something more definitive, I guess. And I'm not asking you, Mr. Lake, to design the plan for us. We're just looking for guidance, so we could just, move through this process.
And you may not have been party to those conversations, but they have been
Right.
happening all the way along. They have, Sarah has given feedback to your consultant. We have given feedback
Mhm.
to the applicant in several commission meetings. So if it seems to me that there's either we can do a roll call vote on the application as it stands, or we can do yet another continuation. And in the meantime, the applicant, including whatever consultants you want to use, can take feedback from Sarah, our staff person, about what the modifications need to be in order to bring it into compliance that we could find renders it something we can approve. We'd love to, as I said several times, we'd love to have this happen right.
Right.
I think I'd like to add that there's the impression that the points that Sarah has delineated point by point have been responded to. But my sense in reading the responses is that the responses, for the most part, said, we already took care of that. In other words, that this point is not valid. So in other words, the points that Sarah has specified have not been addressed, but claims that they've been addressed. And so a more careful look at the particular points that Sarah has shared and that the committee members the commissioners have shared as well from the summary notes would be a helpful starting point in considering a redrafting of a proposal to the commission, in my opinion.
I'd just like to say I agree with my fellow commissioners in general. I think if we are to move ahead with it and reevaluate and not make a final decision today, it would be helpful to see maybe a little more of the site with a walkthrough with all the parties concerned.
Mhm.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We would support that.
Kevin, can I ask you a question?
Certainly.
If we approve this, we would attach a pretty extensive list of orders of conditions, right?
If that the commission can approve applications and apply conditions to that approval, that so it's not a blanket approval, it's a conditional approval if certain things are done. When the things to be done, the conditions get too extensive that it amounts to a major part of the design, then we generally stay out of that and say, come back to us when you're ready.
Do you think that a thought experiment along the lines of coming up with order of conditions would give them the guidance to finally get the answers we need?
I think the more efficient way to do that is for the applicant to review all of the staff reports, the DEP comments, all of the documentation that's been part of this application process all the way along, all the commission meetings have been recorded. You could take a look at those. There have been minutes published. You can take a look at those. The staff reports, Sarah has already communicated. I think the documentation is already there about the kinds of things we would need to see in order to be able to rule positively on this application, which we would love to do.
Thank you.
Downey?
So, this is, to my knowledge, that this is the first time that we've really opened up the operations side. And again, I think that this project is an opportunity to bring about a positive and forward-looking modification of activity on the site with the bonus of adding solar power, which is fantastic. So don't want to stand in the way of this, which is why, as I review, I'm somewhat frustrated by what I see as low-hanging fruit, because I'm thinking that these 5 piers for the solar panels can't be that necessary. And I think Mr. Cavallo has sort of alluded to the fact that these things can be modified within reason. We have in the past, in permitting things, we've incorporated in our order of conditions by reference operations plans, snow storage plans, and I think that that would be very valuable if on a site, and again, the site visit that was done back in the winter is probably at this point maybe stale, and so I think it would be appropriate to go back to the site. But I think at that point we could discuss elements of an operations plan, and then that operations plan could be presented the next time we consider this. And, again, that could be developed in cooperation with staff, and then could be incorporated by reference in our order of conditions. I think that allows you to, with very simple language, to incorporate something that is much more substantial, and that is something that is clearly been adopted by both sides, or been supported by both sides before the final vote for the order of conditions. So I hope that's something that we can work on, since we have now sort of opened up this operation side, so that we can have assurance that going forward, that the operations as well as the permanent structures will be an improvement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's well stated, Downey, and I could see several commissioners' heads nodding while you were talking. So I guess that, going back to my earlier comment, that I think we can either do yet another continuation to allow for the kinds of activities that Downey was just talking about, including a site visit, applicant interaction, first applicant review of all the documentation that has been involved up until now, back and forth with Sarah, and hearing from commissioners on a site visit, observations, that there could be a lot more input. As Downey said, this is the first time when the idea of really addressing the operation of the salvage yard itself has been a major consideration. We have said that that has to be part of this, and I'm glad that it finally is getting the attention it deserves. I would assume from all of what has just been said that the applicant would prefer that we not do a roll call right now, but that we do an additional continuance with a plan for creating that site visit, and an agreement that the applicant will review the materials, mostly the staff report and DEP reports, and will build revisions to the current application in concert with feedback from Sarah. And if that's agreeable, then we can rule on another continuation rather than closing the hearing.
It's agreeable with me.
I appreciate that.
All right, someone, any other comments, or shall I ask for a motion to continue?
Well, I would just ask the applicant for a time frame when the continuance, I mean, if we're going to continue to a particular date, Do we want to do this in 2 weeks? Do we want to do this in a month, given that again, we don't have our summer schedule set yet. So I guess, Sarah, your input would be important too.
We can get the site visit set up in the next week. That's not hard to do. Actually, Rox, what's your
Yeah.
availability like?
So I have, starting from tomorrow through next week, I have 3 key people in Connecticut that are on vacations that I'm filling in for. And then July 14th to 18th or 19th, my grandmother's 107 and she's going to be with me that week because they are renovating the nursing home on her wing and she will be really agitated. So I'm sparing everyone at the nursing home that, and she'll be with me. So I'll be working, but I can't be on site. They did tell me that they'll, if there's a day or 2 or half a day that they're not going to be in her wing, that I could bring her back. But I just don't want to have to worry about this while I have my grandmother.
Yeah.
So,
And let's remember the scheduling the site visit is one step, but there would be those other steps as well.
yeah. So the
reviewing the
7th
literature.
to the 11th, I think is fine with me. Just let me know what day. It's just that following week, I need to be anchored home.
Okay, all right.
But it sounds like it's more realistic to schedule the next meeting for review of this application to allow you the time to do all the things that we've just discussed in addition to the site visit. It's better to have that be in August rather than 2 weeks from now.
That's correct.
That's fine.
So
When's the first meeting in August?
Pardon me, Mason?
When's the first meeting in August?
Maybe the only meeting in August. We haven't decided that yet, but we could decide
Oh.
that subsequent to this. That's on the agenda.
Gotcha.
You will
Does someone
have to
want to
continue
make-
to a time and date
right.
certain.
Someone want to make a motion to continue this to the commission meeting in August, whatever date that may be. We don't know yet.
Has to be a
it's-
date or we'll have to re-advertise.
So
We have to have a specific, it can't just be the next one in August, okay?
could we continue to the 14th of August?
That works for me.
I mean, the other option is that would be 2 weeks previous, the 31st of July. I don't know whether that would be a meeting that people would be amenable to.
14th of August works for me.
August 14th at 5:30.
Sounds good to me.
We had a motion, Downey,
Okay, move to continue this matter to the 14th of August at 5:30 p.m.
and
Second,
is there a second?
second.
Second from David. Any further discussion?
We want to build in a date for meeting on site.
That'd be
We
great.
can set that up by email.
Okay,
And that probably better to do a poll on that to maximize the number of people we can get.
And Roxanne, I don't have your email address. I've
Oh,
never-
It's, yep,
Well,
Roxanne.
you can send me an email. I'm just,
Oh, okay.
so
Okay.
we, just to note to set that up.
Okay.
I don't have your contact. I haven't spoken
Okay.
before.
How do I send it to you?
My email address is, everybody, I think all your consultants have it if you want to.
Okay, I'll get it from them.
Yeah, we can provide it.
Okay.
Oh,
So roll call vote on that.
Mason,
Oh, sorry.
the motion was made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, roll call, Sarah.
All right, roll call to continue to August 14th at 5:30. Paul,
yes,
David,
Yes,
Beth,
Yes.
Melissa,
Yes.
Mason,
Yes,
Downey,
Yes.
and Kevin.
Yes. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next case, the request for
you.
determination of
Good
applicability to determine if installation of septic infrastructure within the riverfront and buffer zone is subject to the Wetlands Act or the Wetlands Ordinance. This on East Hampton Road. Who's here to speak to that?
Hello, it's Cole Modesto from Arlen Beck Associates. Trying to undo my video here. Sorry about that. I'm here representing Phillips Enterprises. We're just here to request applicability for it's an not an upgrade, sorry, it's a remedial use for the septic system. The owner is trying to sell their septic system. They failed a Title V inspection. So their current system, actually, if it's okay, I'd like to share my screen, kind of walk it through that way.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Sure. Used to Teams. Sorry. Great. Can everyone see my screen?
It's coming.
Getting there. There we
There it
go.
is.
Yep, so the client is proposing to do a tight tank. After talking with the Board of Health, this has been our only option available. We perked several times. Part of the reasons the perks were unsuccessful was because there was no native soil found. We all the way down to the bottom of our test pits. It was all fill. So we can't by code site a septic system on this property. The existing septic system is kind of right where, if you can see my mouse, kind of right where my mouse is. So what we were left with, and the Board of Health has already okayed it. They referred us to the Conservation Commission saying it does under the local ordinance require us to go before you guys. Under the Wetlands Protection Act is an exempt activity, seeing that it is a repair to an existing system. They're not upgrading their system. They just simply want to flush their toilet. So what we're proposing is a tight tank is the only option left since there's no siteable area for a system. The tight tank is actually located right where the existing septic tank is. Their septic tank goes out into a leach field. We were proposing the removal and disposal of the existing leach field. There is flow from one other building. This is a current warehouse for Phillips Enterprises. There is one bathroom in there, so that line will remain as is, and that's so we didn't even draw a new line in there. This is the existing line. It will remain as is, tying directly into where it is tied in currently. Obviously, the flow from the office where the main usage will be going into the septic tank, as into the tight tank, and as well as power for the float pumps and the emergencies, as well as the backup pumps that are also in there. That's basically the gist of the project. We're within riverfront area. Where entirety of the limit of work is outside of all wetland area. The riverfront area is because there's wetland up in this area and wetland across the street. And however this happened, there's a culvert underneath the building and it daylights where it then back goes into a culvert across the street.
Questions, comments from commissioners?
Yeah, how does the tight tank work? Has to be pumped out every so many weeks or what?
Right. So as part of Board of Health approval and the Mass DEP code, we have to have actually a contract already in place from the owner to a septic hauler, a licensed septic hauler, who will come on a regular basis. This contract is in place and ready to be enacted once the tight tank is installed. So on a regular basis, they will come once they float. There's multiple ways. You could do it on a regular time basis for 2 weeks once you figure out your usage. I believe what the smartest thing to do right now is once they figure out how often their float valve is going off, that would be their new timeline. So if it's every 2 weeks, then so be it. Then they schedule their time for every 2 weeks and revise their contract. Currently, the contract is written up to be on call 24/7 once those float valves be tripped.
So every once in a while, was there an alarm goes off when it gets to a certain point?
Correct. There's multiple float valves inside there. Once the liquid level reaches a certain point, it trips off one alarm. Then there's a second alarm, and then there actually I should have a diagram of it. Guess not. Well, the float valves are in there. There should be 3 float valves. And once the level hits it, it triggers alarms, an emergency alarm.
Yeah, I believe it said when it's 3/5 full, the alarm goes off. The proposal.
Yeah.
And there's backup power for those alarms?
Yes.
Yeah.
The tight tank is slightly oversized as far as the state minimum. We after talking with the client, it's better to be a little bit more conservative.
Yeah.
Once that alarm goes, give yourself a little bit of buffer room. So it's a 3,000 gallon tank. We don't know the exact size of the existing septic tank, but that tank typically for a office this small is typically a 1,500 gallon tank. So
Right.
it's about double the size.
Right.
How many
Nice.
people are typically in the office?
So we ended up designing it for a total, including the warehouse employees, is what we also wanted to include in our design. We upscaled our design. Currently, there's not this many employees being active, but we designed it for 19 employees in total for the warehouse. The office is by square footage. And again, we build over at Arlev Exercise, we build in a certain factor of safety on our own end as well. So we beefed it up a little bit.
Can you talk about the removal of any of the existing components and grading, and whether you'll need to bring in any soil from offsite to deal with that?
Yeah, sure. So the existing system will likely, typical systems are only about a foot deep. About a foot deep and then about a foot thick from like in the cross-sectional area. So grade usually start about a foot and then about a foot thick. So we don't anticipate fill being brought in. If anything, is loam just to reseed the top. The grading is remaining as is. Currently, this is a lawn area. The grading will remain as is. We're not going to be pitching it any way other than just ensuring we're grading the new grade is pitched away from the house. Well, office.
And removal of the leach field. I'm forgetting exactly where the leach field is, but I'm wondering how close to protected areas that excavation will go.
Sure.
and
So
what
there's sorry.
What the limit of work or erosion controls would be in place to protect that area.
Yeah, we're proposing a silt fence around the limit of work. We gave ourselves a little bit of buffer on the limit of work, as it's hard to locate their field exactly, whether it's going in a rectangular fashion this way or this way. So the wetlands, the nearest wetlands is on the other side of the warehouse on this side. So here's our 100-foot buffer.
Yeah.
There's a 100-foot buffer, and this is the buffer for the riverfront area. The wetlands out here are too far away to show a buffer zone. So silt fence will be outside of wetland buffer entirely, inside of the 100-foot riverfront area.
So how far are you from the nearest sanitary sewer? Yeah.
I don't believe there's sewer along in the street, because that would be a mandatory connection, I believe, under
Yeah,
10.5.
right. I'm curious how far away it is. There must be. There was some sewer on East Hampton Road, but maybe not.
I think it goes to Earl Street.
Yeah, okay.
Huh.
Oh, that would be quite a distance.
Yeah.
Just for my own edification, how old is the current system? Do we have any idea? And it's not required to have a schematic of the design?
Of the design for the
For the
original
current system. So rather than going in guessing where the tank is and guessing where the leach field is.
I believe it predates Title V.
Okay. Okay.
What, 40, 50 years?
All we have on record is the inspection reports of it.
Oh. I did have another question. I was wondering about the weight of the tank, and I noticed that it said something about ballast wings, et cetera, and I'm wondering about the stability of the tank and the weight of the tank.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Design.
And that's one I feel great answering is we do buoyancy calculations for it. So the soil weight over the tank was taken into account, the empty tank weight of the concrete was taken into account, as well as the upward force from the buoyancy force of saturated soils.
Mm-hmm.
So considering totally saturated soils on extreme rain events over extreme periods of time, totally saturated soils will be pushing up. So we are proposing ballast wings be around this, but it's not a needed, it's factor of safety of make sure that tank stays in the ground. The ballast is basically just wings that kind of like a footing on a foundation that are going to essentially add more weight of soil sitting on top of it.
So the main concern is that it could pop up, not that it would sink down.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. And because it's not
I'm
clay.
sorry, I interpreted it like assuming that that's what you
Right.
going
And
downwards. No.
Right, because it's not clay soil, you won't have a problem with expansion and shrinking
No.
of the soils. Okay, thanks.
By the way, it looks like it is about 1,800 feet from Earl Street,
Oh,
which is not enormously long, but it would cost several $100,000 probably to build a sewer.
For 5 people to flush their toilet.
Yeah, right. Unless there
Well,
are,
I guess other companies would
maybe
do it.
others along the way who could benefit from it, but
Other questions, comments from commissioners?
Nope.
Questions, comments from members of the public? If not, so this is an RDA, don't need to close a hearing, but there's Sarah, which box would we be checking here that,
2.
Would be a -2 because if you find that it won't alter the resource area because it's
it seems,
riverfront.
I think most of the commission's questions were addressing that, so.
Yeah.
So someone want to make a motion to that effect, or is there any further discussion? And a motion, please.
So moved.
Issue a negative determination, checking box 2.
I'll
Second
second it.
from Paul.
Yes.
Any further discussion? If not, roll call, Sarah.
Roll call vote. Paul,
Yes.
David,
yes.
Beth,
Yes.
Melissa,
Yes.
Mason,
Yes.
Downey,
Yes.
and Kevin.
Yes. All right, thank you. Next, we're running about a half hour behind here.
Thank you very much
Notice
for
of
your time,
intent
guys.
Thank you.
for grading and landscaping work within the buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetlands. This is Stonewall Drive. Who's here to speak to that?
Hi, I'm Joe Rogers. I'm from GCA Geoenvironmental. I'm a senior wetland scientist there. And also from GCA, Susanna Souza, who is going to kind of introduce the current conditions map and how what we've done to get started in reviewing this project, and let her take over, and then we can tag team on questions.
Very good. Welcome.
Thanks, Joe. I'll just take a moment to share my screen here. All right. Like Joe said, my name is Susanna Souza. I'm an environmental scientist with GZA. The NOI is related to an enforcement order issued on November 6th in 2024 regarding work in the buffer zone. So I'll start us off with the existing conditions plan, which was submitted with the notice of intent on May 21st. The site location is at 42 Stonewall Drive, which consists of 3 parcels. GZA delineated wetlands in the vicinity of the work, which includes wetland C up here at the top, and wetland D down here below. The wetland flags were surveyed by Heritage Surveying, and the 50 and 100-foot buffer zones were staked out in the field. Heritage provided us this plan, and we've color-coded it for the purposes of this NOI. So just walking through the plan, here's the residence in the middle, our dark blue in the buffer zone, are areas of ground disturbance within previously undisturbed 50-foot buffer zone. And coming out here, the light blue are areas of ground disturbance within previously undisturbed 50 to 100-foot buffer zone. You'll see below for wetland D, we have both our light and dark blue colors, but we also have orange, which is for areas of ground disturbance within the footprint of the previously existing lawn. So the dark orange is within the 50-foot buffer zone, and the light orange is for ground disturbance within the 50-foot to 100-foot buffer zone. The red line on the plans is the silt fence, which was for erosion control placed down gradient of the work. And the purple line is the wooden fence that was previously existing on the property when Mark, the respondent, purchased the land. The fence was rotting out and has been removed, and he's looking to reinstall it in place. And the hatching here on the plans are areas that were surveyed by Heritage Surveying to show the limits of ground disturbance related to the work that took place. Hatched areas without color are upland of the wetland resources and out of the buffer zones. I'll pause here to see if we have any questions. I can move on to the proposed conditions. Alrighty. So this is our proposed conditions plan that was also submitted. We have our same colors as before. Our dark blue and light blue areas are proposed restoration areas. The existing loam piles will be evened out, and the area will be seeded with a conservation and wildlife seed mix and native plantings. And these are detailed out on the right here. The restoration plantings table shows the species and the size and the numbers that are proposed. The fence will be reinstalled in its original location and extended along the side yard here in orange. And this will differentiate the lawn space from the forested area. So this yellow area here in the outer buffer zone is proposed to be established as lawn. And down below for our orange areas, these were pre-existing lawn and would continue to be maintained as lawn. I think that's all I have. If Joe, feel free to jump in if I missed anything.
Just one small thing. In that lower place next to the orange, there's that small blue strip, dark blue strip, and light blue strip that also will be revegetated as part of the restoration plan on the back side of the fence, and that would include right along the closest point of the wetland. We included in the notice of intent that any surface sediment that had been migrating at that boundary would be gently pulled back and seeded with the New England wetland seed mix from New England Wetland Plants.
Questions from commissioners? Downey, I see your hand up.
So yeah, I had 2 questions. The first is that the performance standards of the Northampton Wetlands Ordinance say that in general, work and activity within 100 feet of wetlands should be avoided and discouraged, and reasonable alternatives pursued. And it says that certain areas 50 to 100 feet from wetlands may be suitable for temporary, limited, or permanent disturbance. When, and I'll just elide a little bit here, reasonable alternatives to the proposed work or activity do not exist. So just first to address the yellow section, was an alternative to just allowing that to be included within the restoration area considered? If so, why was that not a reasonable alternative?
Sure. Yeah. So we did think about it. We were trying to maintain the fence line and just have a simple straight line approach, and that so it's not a good answer to avoidance, but it was more of a outer buffer zone. The plan that was being discussed was not necessarily to have this be a monoculture within the fence line, but I know that Mark is interested in having a planting plan within his yard as well. So it wasn't we were not considering it to be considering the fact that it's already been disturbed, a large loss of resource protection to have that area vegetated as lawn and native plantings within the lawn itself.
Okay. My second question is as to the orange area. Now, the performance standards say the commission shall not permit alteration within resource areas or their associated protected zones. So that's a shall not, which means that we do not have discretion to allow activity within the resource areas or their associated protected zones, subject to the following exceptions.
Yes.
I'm just wondering which exception is the orange area falling under. Granted, when it was lawn, I suppose the only way that we can read it is that alteration and cutting a lawn, you're not destroying vegetation. You're cutting it back and the lawn will grow back. But in this case, it seems like soil's been disturbed, stone has been moved, topsoil has been redistributed or scraped, and also tree cutting has occurred. So I'm just wondering which exception of 33710D2 allows us to permit this to be maintained as a lawn area.
Well, the lawn, as we mentioned, was a pre-existing condition on this lot. It predated the current owner. It's visible on aerial photos for at least the last 25 years, and portions of which predate the 1997 Wetlands Protection Act.
Is the lawn still there?
The lawn, portions of the lawn are still there. Yeah, so that it has been altered.
Okay.
So the alteration, yes, the alteration has occurred, and it depends on the activity did take place in a jurisdictional area and therefore should have been brought before the commission, which is why we're here tonight. But the replacement of the lawn in kind is not an unusual activity to undertake for any landowner to repair their lawns.
Right. It's just at this point with the disturbance, again, if it was a activity that predated the 2007 update to our ordinance, then the cutting of the lawn could be seen as not just, maybe we could deem it not an alteration because it's not destruction. But in this case, it has been altered. And I'm also just wondering, the purple fence line that's shown, reconstruction, how does that structure, how does that qualify being within the 50-foot?
Same thing. It was a structure that has been there for over 25 years, and the request is for it to continue to be there. But I guess, and stepping one step back with your question, if you are to do, if with your reasoning, I would say that any activity, whether in any direction, would be an alteration, whether it goes from lawn to lawn or lawn to something else would still be an alteration, which would be hard to justify something different than putting it back to lawn.
Well, that's exception D, which is projects will improve the natural capacity of a resource area to protect the interests identified in MDL Chapter 131, Section 40. So we have permitted changes in land use which would remove invasive species if an area had become overrun with invasive species, or native plantings or tree plantings. I'm just, the current fence isn't staying, is it? You're actually putting a new structure there.
The respondent would like to replace it because it's been rotting out and falling over.
Okay, so that's not the continuation of the existing fence. It's a new alteration.
Placement.
It's a replacement. Yeah. It wouldn't be it's not necessarily an alteration if it's being put in the exact same place. The same thing as taking a lawn and changing it into a lawn isn't necessarily an alteration.
Would you call it a repair?
It could be a repair.
Well, it's a replacement and we can't see the original fence.
The original fence shows up on all the aerial photos for the last 25 years.
But it's not there now.
As of this work, no, it's not there now.
Okay.
Except for, I should say, the portion in the south east corner of this figure is still standing.
Okay.
Yeah, that area there.
But you couldn't say there was an aerial photo of a house next to a wetland 10 years ago, but now the house is gone, it's fallen down, so we'd like to replace the house. That's not an alteration. Would you think that was appropriate?
I would actually, to be honest, it would depend on the situation, because you would have an allowances, like say if it was in a riverfront area and you have a foundation that was present and you can document the existence of that, you are allowed to sometimes apply redevelopment standards when there is photo documentation of its existence.
Right. So this would have to be, so then you would say that this was a previously degraded area, so you would have to fit into the definition of degraded.
In that situation.
Part of the difficulty in this circumstance is that we are, when the initial lawn was established, the initial fence was put in, and then this recent work from the last year or so was performed. None of it came before the commission. Walking out there, it seemed like the existing lawn and or at least the description of existing lawn, because it's all torn up now, a lot of it on that southern part, that goes right up to the wetland itself.
Yeah, that one location it does.
And I think there's no way if the applicant came before us last year and say, hey, we're fence is falling down, and it happens to be that is where the border to the wetland is. We just want to replace it. I have trouble believing that we would say, sure, go ahead. I think that right up to the wetland would be a tough case to make. There would be some pullback. What that would be, Downey's reference to what we're limited in our ability to do within the 100 feet. Well, the 100 feet actually runs through the pool and part of the garage. So that's not a realistic amount, but neither is zero back from the wetland. So from my perspective, I think there has to be some pullback from the wetland, some buffer zone from the wetland. Question about whether that's 25 feet, 50 feet, what's the right amount? I don't know. But I have trouble believing that we would ever permit something right at the edge.
I was wondering if is there a question related to that you're.
Well, Kevin, to address that, I think that, looking at this orange area, I think that to allow us to permit it, I think that you would have to permit it under D, projects which will improve the natural capacity of the resource area to protect the interests. And I think that I could see that, in the city, we have a 10-foot minimum in downtown areas. So,
Right.
so if there was 10 feet, if there was maintained, and this would affect the fence plan, there was a 10-foot zone that was going to be native plantings, trees, with a some sort of permanent demarcation. So there was an improvement in that area, and then lawn maintained in the rest. I think you come out at a better place than existing conditions, which would be lawn all the way, prior to this work. So
No, I hear that.
So
I think, with the orientation of the fence line, it actually, just kind of speaking out loud, it looks like there could be an opportunity to connect the fence, to cut off the corner that's closest there. I guess we're kind of near where Susanna's cursor just was.
Yeah.
To change the orientation of that fence a little bit, and that would provide an opportunity to increase the plantings in that area and reestablish the fence line without losing the backyard around the perimeter.
Right.
What's that?
Go to the next angles back from that point on each side, and then go with a line straight across.
Right.
So you're cutting that angle out in the middle, and you're probably be around 10 feet away from that point when you draw a line from the angle down there where you've got your thing all the way up there.
Yep. That looks like that might
And you're
be
almost
about in that
parallel
ballpark.
with the house too.
Right. That could
I
be.
don't want to design your project, but
No. It's a logical.
It looks like it's solving both problems here. You can still have a fence, but you're 10 feet away from the closest point to the
Closest
wetlands.
point on the wetland.
It seems like a logical scenario there. And I guess I think Mark's on the call. I would ask if that's something you would be agreeable to.
Mark, are you
Hello?
on the call?
Can you hear me?
There he is.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, hi. I did actually research a lot about the city's, rules and regulations and stuff, and it did say about this. If at worst, we asked for a 10-foot buffer to the wetland area, and so I would be in agreement with that. The other thing I want to say is that you see the purple fence where it goes to the east and south. And that some of that area is actually wooded. As you see, the orange is the lawn.
Yeah.
Just want to call that out. That's actually wooded. So it might be, beneficial to the commission to not put the fence in the woods, because we don't need the fence in the woods. That's where it was. So we could bring it back to the yard, which would then further delineate it a bit. If that makes sense to you guys.
Yeah, with that one corner point, the fence being at least 10 feet away from that one corner point in the middle.
Yeah, we bring the middle back and then also bring that corner back.
Yeah.
So that the corner's not going and encroaching in on the wetland area.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, me too.
And what type of fence is proposed? The
same as was there. It was a split rail.
Yeah.
We use a split rail and then put the wire mesh to keep the wildlife out of the yard.
Pool.
Mostly bear and deer, but whatever it was, particularly to keep the dog in the yard, so
Yeah,
he
I
didn't
was
go
gonna
out
say,
into the wildlife area. But we would do the same fences was there before. We were just going to replace it because it was rotted. So it's you know, 2-level split rail. It's not. I want to say that if in your maybe Susan can show. I don't have control of the mouse there. Oh, I don't know, but there is an area that's still stockade fence there, and then it changes to split rail.
Yeah, over in the far right corner,
yeah, I
right?
think
Yeah,
that's
right
all the
there.
way to
Yeah,
the
you
east.
Yeah.
know where it is, Joe. You can show them there
Yeah.
on it.
So from
So
from
we
where
would we're just gonna replace the stockade fence with stockade fence and replace the split rail with split rail and wire mesh to keep the dog in if we get another dog. Our dog passed away.
Deer can jump a 6-foot fence.
Easily, yeah.
Well, the bear can climb the tree and jump over the fence, or you can just push it down. So we're not
Right.
we're not going to keep the bear out, but we
Yeah.
can keep the dog in, and the bear doesn't necessarily want to do work to go through the fence. The deer do because they would want to jump over. So just be high enough to keep the deer from jumping over the fence and coming into the yard.
I've had a deer jump over our 5-foot fence, so you
Yeah,
have to be
somebody
pretty.
told me that already. They said you'll need a 6-foot fence, but we're not going a 6-foot fence. Before. And my wife will not allow stockade in the back because she likes to look out at the woods. So the stockade's going to stay where it is, and then the split rail would continue where it was.
Yeah. All right, so as I understand, the modification to the proposal now is to keep the lawn area and the fence that demarcates the lawn area at least 10 feet from the wetland,
Mhm.
and to on the back side of that area to put native wetlands seedings that would establish root systems and stabilize the soil above the edge of the wetland. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, and the shrub and tree plantings
Yeah,
could be
identified,
applied to that area as well.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question to that. I'm wondering about the lawn management program. In terms of herbicides, pesticides, grubicides,
No,
neonicotinoids.
we just do mowing. We just do mow and trim.
So there's no chemical applications?
No, we haven't done any in the whole area. It's only been mow and trim.
Okay, or fertilization.
No, we haven't done any fertilization either. We've only done mow and trim.
Okay, thank you. You've made that clear. I appreciate it. Is this something that we would want in the order of conditions for ongoing maintenance of turf management that's clearly within the buffer zone?
And given the topography that does slope toward the wetland, we have done that in other cases, yes, as a condition.
I'd feel more comfortable with that. I
agree.
appreciate that's the case currently with the owner currently, but things can change. So
Yes, and so if we make it a condition, then it goes with the deed for any subsequent owner as well.
Yeah. Good.
okay, thank you.
I have sort of a question about the credit commission, and I know that like in the past, there's times where we request that there's sort of more permanent markers for the limit of the lawn to prevent lawn encroachment. And I was wondering, do we consider the fence to be sort of sufficient here as like a marker of that? Or is there something else that we should consider?
It's a good question, Beth. In his last term as a member of the commission years ago, Downey was a fan of huge boulders. I'm sure you remember that, Downey.
I remember the bollard and boulder standard discussion that we had.
Right.
I mean, I think in this case, as I was considering this, that the condition, the fence, the split rail fence seems sufficient, with a condition that the Conservation Commission, can enter on the land to confirm that the fence is in place. So I don't know that we would ever use that, but if we needed to, if somebody told us, if some bear told us the fence had been removed and that somebody was building a structure closer, or making some significant difference, again, the buffer zones will still exist. So that 0 to 50 foot, even though the fence will be at 10 feet, we're assuming that this is going to be maintained as lawn, and lawn without the addition of any chemicals that could affect the wetlands.
Yep.
So it's still, so even though we're not putting, boulders at the 50 foot, I think the applicant is here and it will be part of the order of conditions, and it's obviously part of the wetlands ordinance, that the 50 foot will be maintained. And I'm just wondering, since we've sort of fleshed out the bottom edge here, again, would it be possible just to basically throw an angle on the left side so we leave that 100-foot out? Again, cognizant of the fact that there's been significant change in grade there that probably never should have happened with the addition of the fill. And that is not going to be undone. But again, in that case, it would be really nice to keep that 100-foot buffer intact, especially since we are, we can't change the fact that activities have gone right up to the edge of wetland D, but certainly we can provide a higher level of protection going forward for wetland C.
I agree. I think that's reasonable to require. How does the applicant feel about that? Which would mean shifting the fence, I don't know, is that maybe 10, 11 feet in where that yellow area is?
Oh, we're out of the backyard and into the other yard?
Yeah,
that area in yellow,
I'm
Mark.
sorry.
So right now we took the line of your original fence and just pulled it straight out, and they're asking about making it shift or angle slightly, so that yellow area, the fence is basically on the right-hand side of that yellow area.
Can we just remove the fence there?
Yes. I mean, yes, you can remove the fence, though there would probably be, at that point, it'd be important to include some kind of boulder or monument, again, just to.
Oh, well, we have lots of boulders.
Yeah,
from the site, so we could probably rearrange the boulders. I just don't want to move the fence and have it starting to go and follow the buffer zone, which is quite rounded and curving.
Right. Yeah, you'd want to kind of come up with a line that works for you on the right-hand side of it, or stop the fence and switch over to markers like boulders.
I mean, I think outside the 100 foot, outside the 100 foot, that's outside the 100 foot. It's not within our jurisdiction. So as to what you do outside the 100 foot, that's, don't have the fence, redesign the fence. I'm just saying, to the extent that it was within the 100 foot and there's an alternative, like a no build alternative that you just pointed out, that's great. And then going forward, it would be very helpful. Obviously, you're before the commission, before the next landowner, to just scratch their head when they see a line of big boulders and say, there's something probably important about that big line of boulders. Maybe I'll ask, somebody, rather than put up a garden shed or put up a cottage in that, now flatter area, and then find out that they're within 100 foot of a wetlands.
Downey, you're suggesting just eliminating that, the disturbance either by taking the fence out or, just not having any work there and making that small area within the 100 foot the same as the rest of the restoration.
Right. The applicant has just said, rather than make that fence, curve or have multiple angles, since it's a split rail, that leave the fence out. And I think that's absolutely fine. But I would just like something to demarcate that 100-foot boundary. Boulders at 10-foot intervals, boulders at 20-foot intervals, something. It doesn't have to be a solid stone wall by any means, but it has to be something that should be something that people would notice as that's probably a demarcation. That's not a random pattern of boulders in the ground.
So Mark, how about kind of repeating what Downey just said and as a suggestion. So the way this shows the return back to your building, that small section of fence there, if you it basically comes up to that corner of the 100-foot buffer zone. And then so from that location, there'd be a curved line of boulders at like 10-foot intervals up to the property line. As like part of your landscaping.
Straight. I mean, as long as they're at the 100-foot or beyond. If the curve curve is too funky to work
so
with.
like one rock every 10 feet.
That would be fine.
And that would improve your wife's view of the woodlands, Mark.
Yeah, I'm good without the fence there, and then we can put some boulders in to mark off where that area is, the line is.
And that's already flagged?
It's been surveyed and staked.
Yeah, great.
I wasn't able to make the site visit. I'm still in Maine, but related to this area, it's proposed that become lawn. Is that right? That little area inside of the fence that will be.
It is lawn now, Melissa.
I see. It's currently lawn.
It is currently lawn.
Okay.
So if it's going to be demarcated as part of the protected zone, then it would not be lawn. It would just be some kind of natural seed mix or something like that.
Yeah, so I guess then the boulders would keep the mower out also.
Right.
Yes. Exactly.
So yeah, that area would get the New England Conservation Wildlife mix and be part of the planting schedule.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Visually, it would work around the boulders very nicely, and then maintenance-wise, be much easier.
Okay, anything else? Any other discussion?
Other comments from the public?
I don't know if there's any public still on, but if there are any comments or questions from the public.
Yeah, there are some people here. So if anybody has any comments or questions on this, just.
Yeah, I had a question. I'm a neighbor.
Say your name, please.
Johanna Hayes. Yeah, we're a neighbor, and we noticed that there was a huge amount of trees cut down, and one of our concerns was, I guess, kind of handling the loss of the trees, especially knowing that there's already water drainage issues, and being near the wetlands and everything. It just I'm not sure there's gonna be plantings in place or what's going on with that, but it seemed like there was quite a few trees taken down of substantial size to make the lawn. So I guess I was curious to hear more about that.
Doesn't the plan include the plantings of about 25 trees?
75 trees and shrubs total, and right now it's 25 of them are trees for that area. I suspect with the changes that we talked about tonight, there probably would be, if we rework the map, there'll be probably an additional 5 trees and 8 shrubs to fill those areas that we talked about.
And our standard order of conditions usually has something about maintenance to make sure that the trees survive.
Usually we take 3 growing seasons minimum. Then we have to have a photo confirmation of.
Okay.
I'd suggest a condition that requires assessment of those along with a request for certificate of compliance.
Do you use the same thing for wetland plantings and upland plantings, or do you have a different approach?
Basically, just replace anything that's dead, since it's not a wetland restoration or wetland creation area. We wouldn't be looking for specific types of vegetation, but just an assessment of what you planted and making sure it's still there and still live.
Okay. Any other questions, comments from the public?
I do have maybe a request moving forward. My name's Jessie Gonzalez, and I'm also a neighbor. And I would have really appreciated like some notice that there was going to be a lot of work being done. I work from home, and it was loud. It was really hard to manage that, and there was no notice at all. And so, I come from a big city where we get so many documents and so many notices that now I miss that. Because there was no, aside from the visual awareness, that I didn't really have a heads up or a notice of what was happening. So
Neither did
I
we.
guess moving forward.
Yeah, we appreciate your comments, and yes, if things had happened properly, we would have received notice, and there would have been postings and so forth last year. So, but we have to work with the situation we have. So, any other comments or questions from neighbors? If not, is there a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
Made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, roll call, Sarah?
Roll call vote to close the
To
NOI.
close the hearing. This is just to close the hearing.
Yeah. Paul?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Mason?
Yes.
Downey?
Yes.
And Kevin?
Now, is there a motion to grant an order of conditions? Sarah has been capturing the conditions that we've been discussing. So the modification of the 100-foot line and the inclusion of bulgers and on the wetlands, this is all on the north and west side. And then the pulling back from at least 10 feet at the closest on the south side. And let's see.
The trees.
Pardon me?
The trees and the proof that they're still vital in 3 years.
That three, we sometimes have done 5, but 3 years enough to prove that their things have taken hold.
Well, it matches DEP's concerns.
And notification.
Yeah.
How does notification of abutters work?
For
normally, go ahead, Sarah.
For permit applications or?
Well, how will Jesse Gonzalez's concern be addressed in an order of condition?
It can't be.
Okay.
So
this is after the fact.
Applicants are required to notify abutters when a permit application is filed, but there's no ongoing notification provisions for noise or other work.
That's helpful.
Okay. And also no lawn chemicals, no fertilizers.
Right. Thank you. I knew we were missing something. All right, so we have an understanding of what the order of conditions would include. Does someone want to make a motion to grant that order of conditions?
So I would move that we grant an order of conditions with standard conditions, as well as a condition that a 10-foot buffer from wetland D to the south of the house be demarcated by a split rail fence, and that restoration to a natural state occur on the outside of the fence, with the inside of the fence being maintained as lawn. Another condition that no chemical treatment on the lawns surrounding the house. Third condition that restoration of the area within the 100-foot buffer to wetland C, which is to the west of the house. And that the boundary of the 100-foot buffer to wetland C be demarcated by large boulders spaced at no greater than a 10-foot interval. And that a planting plan as presented be executed with assessment of successful restoration being approved by staff after 3 growing seasons before a certificate of compliance can be issued.
Nice.
Well
I
done.
wonder if in addition to chemicals, we should also say organic fertilizers, manure.
Yeah, we could say exogenous fertilizers or exogenous treatments, not
supplemental.
Supplemental.
Take that as a motion and a second.
Are there
Second.
Second by Paul.
any that I missed?
I think that's it. If no further discussion, then roll call, Sarah.
Roll call vote. Paul?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Mason?
Yes.
Downey?
Yes.
And Kevin?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you all. Good
Good
night.
night.
Now, Sarah, we have some acquisition discussion to have. Do we need to go into executive session or is this public?
We do not. This one, it had been an executive session, but is now an open session item. So some of you may remember that we discussed, I think it was middle of last fall, acquiring about 72 acres in the southern Mineral Hills on the East Hampton line, across on Drury Lane, across from where Clear Falls used to be in the Loudville section of the city. So we happily were able to reach an agreement with the property owners who are really excited to protect this. So we'll be submitting a land grant application, and that now requires approval of the Conservation Commission. Just share that.
The Sam Crescione's property?
It is, yes.
Okay.
And
So
is this
these
a-
are Sam's daughters that we're working with.
Mhm.
So it's these 3 parcels here, which is exciting because it's immediately adjacent to the Ridge Conservation Area, which includes, if anybody remembers, Kensington Estates, that was a subdivision that didn't end up going through and is permanently protected. Not shown because my map is a little bit old, is that this is also owned by the Conservation Commission. So that will fill this gap here, and it's a really exciting property. You know, from the ortho, it doesn't look that great, and if you do a desktop analysis, it doesn't seem that exciting. But if you go out there, wow, it is really cool. You get views of the Holyoke Range, which are pretty rare in Northampton, especially from this angle. There's a lot of exposed ledge. There's not any rare plants, at least not that we found so far, but in habitats that aren't super common in Northampton. And this field area is a really cool, like exposed ledgy, like mossy area, with some wetlands there as well. And some opportunity maybe to create an all persons trail to this area and the views of the south. You can't see the water tower from the property, which is also exciting. So 600,000 is the price that we agreed on. Land grant will not cover all of that, but we're going to be piecing together other funding sources. So I'm happy to talk more about the property, or you could just vote to authorize the land grant application at this point. We're hoping to be able to close pretty quickly after the land grant is announced, whether it's successful or whether it's not. We'll be going for Community Preservation Act funding in the fall round, and also seeking donations because we will have a pretty significant gap.
How much could the land grant possibly be?
So the land grant will cover up to 66%. It won't be 66% of the full 600,000. It will be less than that. I don't have all the numbers, but they will cover some of the soft costs. So appraisals, phase 1 environmental assessment, survey, and other work.
I see.
And is there open space dollars left in the Community Preservation Fund already that are dedicated for open space?
So none for this one currently. We are using the Conservation Fund for some of the initial soft costs. We did have to hire the appraisal. We've done some additional ecological due diligence to try and make our case about how exciting this is, since the mapping of it at the state level was pretty poor and didn't include the wetlands or other exciting features that were there. But we will be receiving additional Community Preservation Act funding starting in FY26. So we're tapped out for FY25, fully spent out and more funding for playground and other projects, but that resets July 1st. So the CPA will be meeting about those in September, October.
So you need a vote from the commission to proceed?
Yes, please. So at this point, it's just approval to submit the land grant.
Yeah. Someone want to make a motion to that effect?
So
All right, anybody have further questions of Sarah, first of all? If not, someone want to make a motion to authorize the next step in these negotiations and securing of the funding?
so moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. All in favor, Sarah?
Right, roll call vote for the land grant. Paul,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
Melissa,
Yes.
Mason,
Yes.
Downey,
Yes.
and Kevin.
Yes.
Okay, great.
And at that point, we must be getting up close to 27-28% of Northampton's land area protected in perpetuity by now.
Yeah,
28?
I mean, there's a couple different ways to look at it. So there's overall protected land, which includes like Look Park and Florence Fields
right,
and
right.
active recreational facilities. And then there's active agricultural areas, which are also protected, but for different purposes. But prime, pristine ecological protection is still less than 25%.
Okay. But this looks like pretty densely forested
Yeah,
area.
it is. Yeah. And it's happily really free of invasives except for the front area,
Oh,
which has
wow.
the parking lot for Clear Falls. It's a
Wow,
cool property. Yeah.
really?
When the mosquitoes die down a little bit, they're they could visit.
That was the one good thing that I found about the 100-degree day is that the mosquitoes were not in evidence down by the river.
They,
So
they melted.
I think they got dehydrated and
The little tiny wings melted.
They probably stewed.
all right. So next we have to say we've decided we're meeting on the 14th of August. Do we want that to be our only August meeting, or
Yeah,
what do
and
people think?
we don't necessarily have to decide now. I did intend to send out a poll prior to the meeting, but it fell off my list of attachments to you. So August 14th will be the August meeting. If people know right now what their schedules are in July, we could try to nail something down, or I could send a poll.
I have to look at my.
But Monday, July 7th.
I think I got a rice harvest in my backyard. Other than that, I'll be here.
My in-laws are visiting on the 10th, so it's not a great day for me, but otherwise I'm free.
The Roxanne for the visit
She said 7th to the 11th.
would work for her.
Yeah.
I don't know when I'm going to be back from Maine. I might be back that week, but otherwise so I wouldn't be able to do the site visit, but I could still go to the.
So I'll send out a poll for July.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
We do
Yeah,
have a couple
given that we're
applications pending.
on
One of them
Zoom,
is a
it
significant.
makes things a little easier.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we do have a couple of things for July and nothing that, I don't think the applicants are in a huge hurry. But definitely some things to consider.
Okay.
All right, I think that's it for me.
All right, well, thanks, everybody. I'm glad that the first case turned a little more positive than it started out. So, well done.
They keep asking for hand holding.
Or not. At
It-
least
It's
not
very
when you reach
similar
out the
to
hand.
it's very similar to students saying, "Tell me exactly what I need to write in my paper
Yes.
for me to
Yes.
get
In order
for
to
me
get
to
a
get
good
the a
grade.
passing grade." Right.
It-
So
it
you
is.
give the guidelines, you give the assignment,
Yeah.
you give examples, but
Exactly.
you don't write it for them.
But it's still a difficult thing.
It's work.
It's a junkyard in the wrong place. It shouldn't be
Yep.
next
Yeah.
to a river.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
and then
Yeah.
not in a floodplain either. So it's
Yes.
extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Extremely difficult,
You're
but
so right.
I'm
It's a
rooting
tough
for them. I hope
situation.
they can pull
I
it
know.
off.
I try to give them business.
All right, anything else, anybody?
Nope.
If not,
Okay.
thank you so much, Sarah. I
It's-
think uh, we've left Sarah, I mean, all of us are going to be still involved with the Mount Town project, but we've left Sarah in the position of having to do more back and forth with them than.
Sorry
than
about
that's-
that, Sarah.
But let's hope it's more fruitful than it has been in the past.
All right, and I'll follow up with the site visit date once we hear from.
Okay,
Sounds
great.
Sounds good.
That's good.
Okay,
All right, thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
bye-bye.
See you
Bye.
soon.
Adios.